I'm really quite flabbergasted, to tell you the truth. I think it's very important. I can't imagine why the prosecution and the defense would not want to preserve this. Brian, as you know, you covered Parkland, you know, it's down in Broward County where I am. The building is just going to come down now after this second trial after 5 years. And I'm concerned because I would think that as a trial lawyer, a prosecutor, and as a defense lawyer, and Sara knows this, trials are so unpredictable. And that's why you do preserve the evidence. Now, we know that with technology now, there's so many ways to bring certain evidence into the courtroom. But there's so many times when jurors do have questions, and you do, in the middle of a trial, move for a jury view. And we've seen it time and time again in high-profile cases. So like I said, you never know what's going to happen in a trial. You never know what's going to go on. And I think it's very important that this evidence be preserved.
Sara, does it benefit one side more than the other in terms of defense or prosecution? Because one thing I find interesting with this is it seems like everyone on all sides seems to agree that it should stay.
I mean, first of all, girlfriend just uttered half of my talking points, okay? I mean, that is absolutely the case here, especially in this case, like Stacey said, trial is such a fluid process and strange things can happen. And even though I kind of might understand why the prosecution, it's their burden, it's their case in chief, and they might feel like they have no need for this home. But for the defense to not object to the demolition is absolutely baffling to me, because to me, even though the house itself is not evidence, it has as much evidentiary weight as the evidence does. And so, look, Brian, I think whether or not it helps one side or another depends on the case. In Murdoch, I think it would have been more helpful to the defense than the prosecution. Ultimately, that was a wash. But here, I think I think it's more helpful to the defense probably because there's one of the biggest questions is the idea of how did Brian Kohberger or the assailants enter this home? How did they navigate to go to 2 different bedrooms and silently slay 4 different people and then walk out in such a short span of time? And so it's very critical for a jury to be able to do this field trip and take a look for themselves and place the evidence that they've heard in this physical context. Is it possible for one person to do this in the way that it's described? And remember, Brian, that the eyewitness, the surviving roommate, gave inconsistent statements about what she saw and heard. So again, that makes it even more important for the jurors to be able to go there.
Are you surprised, Stacey, because a big part of your career has been working with victims of crime? Are you surprised that this public university is ignoring, these calls from the victims' families? And again, let's not forget, this just happened in November. I mean, it hasn't even been a year. And despite the family saying, please don't tear it down yet, they seem insistent on doing it.
Well, am I surprised? No. I mean, they want incoming students, and they don't want something from a crime scene on campus. The interesting thing is this, on a huge campus like that, to fence that area around, not everybody has to go by that house, unlike in Parkland, where those kids had to go on campus every day and look at that building. There is a way around on a campus that students don't have to go by that house. So the whole thing really does not make sense to me. And to Sara's point, to think that, we don't have all the evidence in this case, and a prosecutor's job is not just to seek a conviction. A prosecutor's job is to seek justice. And so, like I said, you have times in the middle of a case where you might think there's something rock solid and somebody says something different. And you might even say to yourself, you know what, I need to see that. I need to go out there. So I'm not surprised at this, but remember one thing. The court trumps what the university says. So the university can say right now, listen, this is our feeling. You march into court and you get that court order, that evidence is then preserved.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was just thinking, Sara, I mean, can you imagine if during the trial, the jurors, say, oh, but we want to know what you could hear from the downstairs if there was someone upstairs, or we want to see visually what it looks like. I mean, what if they asked to go to the house? Are they going to have to explain why it was torn down?
Yeah, and I would imagine, I mean, almost everybody's heard about this case and what goes on in this case, and I'm sure the jurors would have heard what happened to this house. But yeah, that's exactly what we're saying, is that there might, the need to see the house, to be in the house, might be necessitated as this trial unfolds. And, I mean, here we're dealing with a proprietary interest that the university has, or like you said, the PR interest that they have that, like Stacey said, we can work around, versus the constitutional right of Brian Kohberger, which, by the way, is for both sides. The prosecution wants him to have a fair trial as much as the defense wants him to have a fair trial. So it's really, I mean, I think it's a no-brainer, but why not object to this? I mean, I think that the defense, and listen, I've commended Ann Taylor based on what I've seen in her filings. I think she's a great defense attorney, and I'm baffled at why she won't make an objection to this demolition, because at least she preserves the record so that down the line, like you said, if there's a need to be there, and they've already said, we don't want this demolished, we're objecting, then, they could potentially get a favorable evidentiary ruling because that objection's on the record. But they're not even doing that. So I really don't know. I mean, the only thing that I can think of is that maybe there's something really not favorable to Kohberger, and that's why, that she's so certain that she's failing to object. But I mean, better to err on the side of caution in this scenario.
Yeah, or they all just think that things can start to feel a little more normal in that town with the house gone. But it's like, we saw it in Parkland as Stacey said. I mean, just, give it a little more time. They were able to deal with it there. It was hard, but for them, it was worth it for that building to stay up through the trial. Sara Azari and Stacey Honowitz, thank you both so much for coming on with me tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.